Hello, welcome back to Learn to Speak Basic Conversational French. This is Lecture 2, and in it we're going to have a look at the French language in itself, so its different intricacies, a little look at the grammar side of things, although I know this course is focused mainly on speaking, and we're going to check out the similarities and differences between English. So, the tenses. Now, the different tenses are used to determine whether an action takes place in the past, the present, or the future. So much like in English, however, each verb in French has a different ending determined by which tense we're talking about. So, if we're doing something in the past, if we're talking about an action in the past, we're going to look at using an E with an accent as the ending. And if we're going to talk about the future, then we can use a simplified version, which is the I am going to version, or we can use a more simplified version in terms of length. So we can do that by using just a simple verb on its own and changing the ending. Okay, so French consists of 17 tenses, with 6 verb endings for each subject. So we will have me, you, he, she, it, we, you, plural, and they. And that differs from English because our only addition in English is an S to the he and she. So, for example, the I play, you play, he plays, we play, they play, and you play plural. Our only difference there is that we add an S. However, in French, they would all have a completely different ending, which can seem quite daunting, but it's something that we will look at together if needs be, and we'll work through at our own pace. Okay, so simplified versions, as I say, of the past and the future are the most useful when using spoken French. Okay, le and la. Now this can be quite tricky. It's still tricky for people who've been learning a language for 10 years, 15 years, and it's quite tricky for the natives as well sometimes. Some people get it wrong on a daily basis. Some people now and again will get stuck on which one it is. So every French noun has a gender, which means that every noun is either classed as masculine or feminine, which is something obviously that we don't have. Now, it's not always obvious whether it's le or la, and it's something that you can't learn. There's no rule behind it. You just have to know it through experience by using the language as often as you can, practicing it as often as you can, and hopefully you'll be able to remember when it comes down to it. Okay, a quick look at the most common difficulties. So the difficulties are going to be coming to terms with le and la, which is still difficult for me now, 10 years after starting learning the language, and as I say, difficult for people who've been learning it all their lives. The throaty sound, which is used to produce the letter R, especially mid-sentence. So, for example, we're going to use the word rare, which is spelt the same in French, however, the R sound is a R sound, which obviously we don't have in our language again, so that is quite difficult sometimes. Mid-flow, in mid-sentence, when you're trying to whip out a word or a sound like that, it's not necessarily the done thing in our own language, so it is quite difficult sometimes to actually produce it. And encountering slang words and remodeled versions of something we already know. So, comment t'appelles-tu? Which, as we'll look at later, is French for what is your name? Sometimes you will have French people who will like to mix it up, or French people who've said it a different way for the whole of their lives, and they'll ask you it differently. So the example here becomes tu t'appelles comment? Now, that's not too bad. It means the same thing, the same words are there, but in spoken French, it's not necessarily easy, because it doesn't follow a formula that you're used to, it's not necessarily easy to work out that it means the same thing. And when I moved over to France, I was staying with a host family, and they asked me what my surname was, in a different way to my school had always taught me. So when they asked me, all they got was a blank expression, until I realised what they'd asked, and the answer I'd given was yes. So they asked me what my surname was, and I answered with yes, because I didn't have a clue what they were talking about, and for about 3 weeks after that, they laughed and laughed and laughed at me, which was fantastic, as you can imagine. Okay, a little booster to your confidence here. Think of all the French you already know. So, bon voyage, obviously used quite a lot when we go anywhere. C'est la vie, popular in songs as well as films. Bon appétit, which if you're anything like me you might use now and again as well, and à la carte, if you eat out a lot you will come across this quite often. And as a final note, French can sound very fast, it can sound difficult to understand, and quite inaccessible as well. But if you follow the steps that we're going to go through, if you get familiar with all the words and phrases that we're going to use, it will seem a lot slower, and trust me on this one, it will become easier to understand. You'll be watching it, you'll pick out words that you already know, and your overall understanding will become much, much better. So, now that we know a bit more about language, as I say, let's get started with learning some. I'll see you in Lecture 3. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.